Now, you might wonder, where are all these good cops I always hear so much about? If there are good cops, why don't we see them everywhere? We're going to talk about what this guy says right here about Met cops, but real quick, what is a Met cop? With more than 43,000 officers and staff, the Met is the UK's largest police service. It currently has 25% of the total police budget for England and Wales. And this guy right here is going to talk about the epidemic that they have going on inside the Met.
So, I mean, looking at the, sort of just the next few weeks ahead, most weeks there's 2 or 3 officers going to court for criminal cases, which tends to be a mix of sort of dishonesty, violence, and sort of violence against women and girls type offences, domestic abuse, sexual offences, etc. So
notice how quickly he went over that last part right there.
There's probably two or three a week that are sort of appearing at court.
The Met is in crisis. Did you see from the inside where and how it went wrong?
Policing is in crisis. The Met is in crisis. There is a legitimacy problem. Our performance isn't what it should be.
Why would policing be in crisis? Why would there be a question of legitimacy within police departments, not just in the UK, but also in America and all over the world? Why is there that crisis? What's the kernel of the problem here? What is the root of this issue? How do we resolve this?
And certainly professional standards are not what they should be. But this didn't happen overnight. This has happened over decades. So the idea that it suddenly happened on the last Commissioner's watch is wrong.
The new Commissioner, Sir Mark Rowley, has called for more power to sack officers who aren't up to it. There needs to be a total clear out in your view.
I think Mark Rowley is doing precisely the right thing. There ought to be a zero tolerance for people who are prejudiced, who are corrupt, who are have the kind of backgrounds of the ones you've described, which shouldn't be anywhere near policing.
Who are criminals.
Yes.
You said
prejudice, corrupt, criminals within the Met? The law enforcement community that, is basically has responsibility for Scotland Yard, or called the Yard. The Met, with 43 to 46,000 police officers, has a corruption problem, has a violence problem, has a woman abuse problem, has a sexual problem. What's going on here?
It's more than a few bad apples. Clearly, the last few months have shown us that. So does it need to be a wholesale clear out in the Met?
I'm not sure what a wholesale clear out means. There are 46,000 people in the Met. I've worked in it for 30 years alongside thousands and thousands of people, and the vast majority of them are fantastic people.
But
if the vast majority of police officers are fantastic people, then why aren't these fantastic people calling out the bad apples that are corrupt, that have sexual problems, that have abuse problems, that have women problems, that have dishonesty problems? You would think that you would see that everywhere if that was the case. And you would think that if you had all these good police officers keeping an eye on the bad police officers, way more of them will be put on blast and would be going to court and actually would be going to prison. But that's not what you see. Even though that one guy said that there's 2 or 3 per week that are being exposed for these crimes within the police department, you would see way more of them if there were more police officers that were good. All the good apples we always hear so much about?
Hundreds, if not thousands, need to go.
Yes, I think that's correct. If you're a police officer watching this, and you are, like the vast majority of police officers, a good person who wants to do the right thing, then you have to be the person who doesn't walk by when you see that kind of behavior.
You would have already done it. You couldn't walk by if you see that kind of behavior. This, by the way, comes from I think it's Pinaki. Photography is not a crime, I guess. I don't know what the last I stands for. But this is Pinaki News. And I like a couple of these. It says there are way more bad apples than good. I totally agree with that. And we can show that conclusively. We can conclusively prove that there are way more bad apples than there are good apples, because if you did have all these good apples, then every time something bad would happen, you have a good cop on the scene who's stopping the bad activity, the evil activity, the violent activity. Like this thing that happened in Memphis. Not one good cop was able to step forward because they weren't on the scene. If there was a good cop on the scene, they never would have allowed his fellow cops to do that. So he says there are way more bad apples than good, and that's coming from whistleblowers inside the police. This guy says every copper who hasn't reported a colleague for committing crimes is complicit. Amen. Totally agree with that. All coppers should be asked how many of their colleagues you have reported. If they're long-serving constables, they should be investigated if their answer is none. And again, this isn't just relegated to the Met, but I do want to just real quick before we leave, this guy right here, this Sir Mark Rowley, who's the Met Police Commissioner, I want to reiterate what this guy said. He said that 2 or 3 cops per week are facing charges in court for criminal cases ranging from dishonesty, violence against women, domestic abuse, and sexual offenses. And he kind of wanted to go over that last part real fast and gloss over it. But I want to remind you that this is not a rare occurrence. Back in the 1970s, in fact, in 1970, there was something called the Knapp Commission, and I'm just going to read this from the Wikipedia page. And this is something that everybody needs to see before you start saying stupid stuff like, well, there's only a few bad apples. Everybody else is really good. The commission to investigate, this Knapp Commission was a commission to investigate alleged police corruption, known formally as the Knapp Commission after its chairman, Whitman Knapp, was a 5-member panel initially formed in April of 1970 by this guy right here to investigate corruption within the New York City Police Department. And this says right here, the creation of the commission was largely a result of the publicity generated by public revelations of police corruption made by patrolman Frank Serpico and Sergeant David Dirk. The commission concluded, here was the conclusion of the Knapp Commission. And hold on for a second, because 22 years later, there was another commission called the Mullen Commission, and it compares what they found 22 years later to what Knapp found. The Knapp Commission concluded that the NYPD has a systemic corruption problem. Systemic corruption problem, confirming the existence of widespread corruption, and made a number of recommendations. Why is there systemic corruption? Because power corrupts. And absolute power corrupts absolutely. This corrupting influence that power has on the human psyche is nothing that anybody should be surprised about. Here's the Mullen Commission. Wait till you see the conclusion of the Mullen Commission as it relates to the Knapp Commission from 22 years prior. It says right here, the Mullen Commission is formerly known as the City of New York Commission to investigate allegations of police corruption and the anti-corruption procedures of the police department. Former Judge Milton Mullen was appointed in June 1992, that's 22 years after the Knapp Commission, by then New York City Mayor David N. Dinkins to investigate corruption in the New York City Police Department. Oh, you mean there was still corruption in the New York City Police Department 2 decades after the Knapp Commission? It says Mullen's mandate was to examine and investigate, quote, the nature and extent of corruption in the department, evaluate the department's procedures for preventing and detecting that corruption, and recommending changes and improvements to those procedures. I'm going to just skip right to the chase, and I'm going to show you what the conclusion of the Mullen Commission was. Today's corruption, 2 decades after the Knapp Commission, today's corruption is not the corruption of Knapp Commission days. Oh, no, hold on to your seats. Corruption then was largely a corruption of accommodation, of criminals and police officers giving and taking bribes, buying and selling protection. Corruption was, in its essence, consensual. Today's corruption is characterized by brutality, theft, abuse of authority, and active police what? Active police criminality. So when you see people in New York, auditors in New York, like Brooklyn Audits, go to the 95th and the 79th precincts, and they're telling you need to turn your cameras off in the lobby because we got this nice little sign right here. This little sign right here says that you can't roll those cameras. And if you continue to roll those cameras, we're going to steal your property from you. We're going to lay our hands on you. We're going to kidnap you, and we're going to throw you into one of our cages, and we're not releasing your property to you. So I wonder what kind of corruption is going on in the 79th and the 95th and the 72nd and all the precincts of there in New York after failing the test in the commissions of Knapp and Mullen. And they wonder why we turn our cameras on them. And they wonder why we don't believe the mantra of there are all these good apples right here. It's the few bad apples that are spoiling the whole bushel. That's nonsense, according to the statistics, their own statistics. Remember, the government of New York commissioned these two, the Knapp and the Mullen Commission. They're the ones who funded it. They're the ones who wanted the NYPD investigated. Can you imagine how much worse it actually is? Because that was basically the government investigating itself and saying, well, it's pretty bad. I mean, and not only that, it's worse. So how much worse do you think it is? Because these things don't get better. They don't shove things. They do shove things under the rug until it becomes a mountain and it becomes this huge elephant that nobody wants to talk about. But how much worse do you think it is now than it was in 1992? Now we're 30 years. We're 3 decades removed from the Mullen Commission, which is 2 decades removed from the Knapp Commission. Imagine how much worse it is now. How much worse do you think it is? Leave your comments in the comment section below. If you haven't done so already, subscribe to this channel, hit the bell notification icon, give it a thumbs up, share it with everybody you know. Don't forget to subscribe to my private email list through my website, highimpactflix.com. If you want to support this channel, the support links are in the description, including this link right here to get these hard-hitting conversation starting designs you can put on any shirt, hoodie, mug, cell phone case that you're going to be using to record the police, like New York City Police Departments. And I'll see you guys in the next heavily censored shadow ban video.